I have to tell you, I mean, American Christian religion is just amuses me all over the place. I'm one of those who believes, Neil Postman, who's an educator, who believes that our culture is amusing itself to death. And we just watch TV and we see all kinds of reality TV shows and it amuses us. And the real stuff that's going in the world, we just sort of pass it by because it's a little too complex. And as long as we're amused, we're okay. I remember I wrote this down because I was so amused at the death of Cardinal Cook a few years ago, who was the cardinal in New York City, a wonderful, wonderful guy. One of the TV reporters was reporting on Cardinal Cook's funeral and going through the service, and at one point he reported the hymn, you know, "Oh God, our help in ages past." The TV reported the hymn as, "Oh God, our health and age has passed." And that tells you all you need to know about how the TV understands and the reporters understand American religion. Not. So there's very little that you can believe and accept when it comes out of a reporter's mouth in terms of their insight into religion of any sort. You know, everybody knows the word now in Islam, Shiite and Sunni. But if you throw in the word Sufi, everybody will look at you as if you have two heads. And yet that is a very prominent and predominant group, which will take care of much of the troubles that are going on in the Middle East now. And no, you've never heard a word about them, I'm sure, on television, simply because that's a little too complex and there's no soundbite that goes with that very nicely. The other thing that can happen a lot of times with Jesus is that you can just come up with different ways of praying and thinking about faith and about rationalizing the faith and behaviors and all of that kind of stuff. I saw a story about a young man who went off to college, and you know, I don't know about you, but my kids, they never call me back, ever, regardless of age, unless I hassle them until they finally surrender. They'll text, but not call. And this young man, I'd been in college for a month, he texted his dad and said, "Feather in my cap, elected class president." And that was the only message for a while, and then of course comes home for the semester, goes back, second semester, texts again, "Feather in my cap, been accepted into a great fraternity." Comes home for another semester and goes back again to college, sends another text later on in that semester, "Feather in my cap, leading role in the class play." And then comes home and goes back for that fourth semester, send a text to his brother this time. "Flunked out. Prepare father. Tell him to send money for me to get home." And the brother texted him back, "Father prepared. Prepare yourself. Father says, put those feathers on your shoulders and fly home." Like I said, you know, religion and especially our understanding of who Jesus is and our relationship to him can often get conflated and convoluted. And sometimes you have to get back to the basics of the faith, and that's precisely what happened on the Mountain of the Transfiguration with those disciples. They had been going off into other areas of thinking and thought, a couple of them thinking that Jesus was going to be leading a revolution, others thinking that he was just going to be a great teacher, and then he was going to die and that'd be the end of the story, and establish his own school of education, that sort of stuff. And what he did on the Mountain of the Transfiguration was simply to shut them up. Just simply shut them up. You've all had occasion to do that with relatives or friends at some point. Just shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything. Just be quiet. And that's what happened on the Mountain of the Transfiguration. And what Jesus did was simply to be there, and in his transfigurement, he was shining brighter than the brightest sun, and brighter than the brightest sunlight. And what came into view was Moses and Elijah. Now Moses, just so you know, in both Old Testament and New Testament understanding of things, Moses is the greatest of the prophets. I know you typically don't think of Moses as a prophet, but that is how he is understood in Bible history, as the greatest prophet of them all. And Elijah was the precursor of the Messiah. We understand that to be John the Baptist, but in the rest of the Bible, up to John the Baptist, it was Elijah. And so when Jesus met with those three guys in front of the disciples, it was very simply to say to the disciples, not to Jesus, but to the disciples, be quiet, watch. You don't get it yet. And so that is why, as they left that mountaintop, Jesus told the disciples not to talk about it, not to say anything, because they didn't process it yet. They didn't understand precisely what was going on, except that some very special kind of revelation had happened that they didn't understand yet. Now, the revelation which you already know about, by virtue of your being Christian people, is that you know that God created the world, all of it, people and creation and nature, the whole cosmos, out of his love. And that his relationship with people and with nature has been initiated by him out of his graciousness. That is, he didn't have to and doesn't have to do anything which we know and understand now, but he has done it and has accomplished it. It's a revelation of both clarity and power. The clarity part being that we can look at each other at this very second and we can see with clarity that we're all here, right? We can look at each other and say, we're here. Tracy, you're here. Now, I see that with clarity. What I need also as a Christian to see with clarity is that I did not create you. God created you. Therefore, what do I do with you? You see, that is the other part of the graciousness and the love of God, is that we are created out of his covenant of graciousness, in which he makes a hard-nosed, straight-up commitment to say, I love you, no matter what. And that then is our calling with each other, that we are to love each other. And I don't mean that erotically. I mean that simply in terms of having a hard-nosed commitment to try somehow to help each of us to increase our humanity, the humanity which we know through our soul to be present in us in the image of God. Now, so basically on the Transfiguration, Mountain of Transfiguration, Jesus was able to say to them, yes, you are created. I am the Son of God. You are created. God has made a covenant with you. He loves you all of the time. And because he loves you, therefore what has been built into you by virtue of you having been given the soul with the image of God present in it is your response to that covenant. And your calling then is to live an equal covenant with God, to make a good response that makes some sense. And your response really is to explore the love which is present in the world, to take care of the world, to repair it, to steward it. That's the way in which we make response in a covenantal relationship. And if you want to think of it another way, it's simply answering these two questions, very simple. What will you do with what you know? The presumption is, as Jesus had on the Mount of Transfiguration, that you know some things about God, his love for you, the covenant he's made with you. Now that you know that, and because you know it, and as you mature in it, you know more about it, How will you live in it now, at whatever age you are? So the covenant really is a dynamic way of thinking about your life. Because as your life changes and your life experience change, so does the way in which you make response to the covenant, which Jesus talks about. Now the other thing with the transfiguration, and the reason he told the disciples to be quiet, that they didn't get it. Think about the times and the occasions in Jesus' ministry when people were transfigured with joy. You had a lady, for example, who had her period for what, 12 years? Bleeding for 12 years without any of the medications that are available today to help in some small fashion. And when he healed her, can you imagine the transfigurement in her face and her features? The joy which attended that healing. The man who was possessed by a demon who couldn't belong to the community simply because he was so whacked out and couldn't even talk any kind of sense, all of a sudden is cleared up of his demons and transfigured with the joy of being able to take part in his family life, in his community life, with his friends, get a job, hold a job, those kinds of things. So that's part of the story of the transfiguration on the mountain of the transfiguration. That transfiguration doesn't occur just on a mountain with a few people, but you see it every single day of your lives. And if not every single day, pretty near every week, you see somebody transfigured from either sadness or mourning or anger or frustration to a joy about life and a happiness about life. And that's part of the good news. John Chrysostom, he's a 4th century monk, by the way, couldn't leave you without some monkishness, says this about the transfiguration and about people. He says, the transfiguration revealed something of Jesus' divinity as God, as much and insofar as they were able to understand and apprehend it. And it showed the indwelling of God within Jesus. So that's always a piece of it too. That's why he told the disciples to be quiet when they were going down the mountain. You don't get it all, but you get a piece of it. And that's important. And that's how you know that you have faith. When you can see other people's joy, even in the midst of your own pain or anguish, when you're in a crabby mood, and you can still see that the world is running quite nicely, thank you, even if you're in a bad mood. All right, big deal. But you can still see that there is beauty and truth and love and justice, regardless of the circumstances of your own life. And that is why we need a day of the Transfiguration like we do today, to remind us and to revisit some very familiar territory, and to come back to this storyline, because in the last year, in every one of our last years, we always build up a sort of a false picture of who Jesus is and what he has done for us and what he promises to do with us. And he's not just a great teacher. He's not like Moses or a prophet like Moses. He's not just a great healer like Elijah was. He's not just an enlightened, intelligent man. He is the Son of God, who has made a covenant with us in which he has chosen freely to love you. And he hasn't negotiated it out with you. He hasn't made a contract with you that you can break. He has said, I love you, I will always love you, no matter what. I will always be present in your life, and you will see my face in the face of other people and other circumstances, and I will always invite you back to the covenant in which you love the world. And the way in which you love the world is really very simple. You love it by caring for it. That's the only way that you can. Bishop Sheen, who was a well-known TV personality in the days of black and white TV, very famous bishop, with his own TV show for many years, was scheduled to speak in Philadelphia one time. And so he thought he'd walked from his hotel to City Hall where he was going to be giving his speech. And on the way he got lost. And he ran into some young people, and he went up and he asked them, "Hey, how do I get to City Hall?" And of course they were, hanging out on the street, saying, "Yeah, what do you want to know for? Where do you want to go and why?" "Well, I'm going to give a lecture," the bishop said. And the kid said, "What are you giving the lecture about? What's it about?" He said, "I'm going to give a lecture on how to get to heaven. You want to come along?" Well, the kid said, "What, are you kidding me? You don't even know how to get to City Hall." Now you understand why Jesus said on the mountaintop when they were coming down the mountain, "Shh, button it up." What he was saying to them was this: God has made a covenant with you. It's not a contract. He's made a covenant, his end of things. I'm going to be gracious to you. I'm going to love you. I'm loving the entire world. The covenantal end of things from your end is you love me best by loving my world and the people in it. Now that doesn't mean being taken advantage of, okay? I know a lot of times when you think about love, you feel as a Christian you have to be taken advantage of. I'm not talking about that at all. Not being taken advantage of. It is your commitment to people, and if you need to be confrontational with them in terms of their abusiveness of you or their behavior, that's what you have to do. The point is, you're trying to draw people's fullness of humanity, the image of God, out into more prominence. And when you do that, you will then have a person who is loving the world in a really good and healthy kind of way. You're going to have people who are going to be asking the questions about how do you love nature? How do you care for the environment? How do you handle the race relations, which are always an issue, not only in our country, but all over the world? You're going to have people who are going to realize that it is the politicians all over the world who will identify religion as the primary issue because it's convenient to believe that, rather than the truth, that it's power politics and money, and that if you can follow the money and you can follow the power and the lust for power, you will find your source of war. Those are the kinds of things in the covenant which you make with God that you can live out in your daily life. It's the promise he's made to you. I love you. I provide you graciously every day of your life. And you love me best when you love my world.